And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us. And one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it. And that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Hello, foil fanatics, and welcome back to another new episode of Tinfoil Tells. I'm your host, Brandon. Now we're going to be joined by my guests, Steve and Leslie Shaw. Steve has been in contact with extraterrestrials for a long time, and they were kind enough to come on here tonight and talk about that. Before we dive into our stories with Steve and Leslie, if you'd like to be on an episode of Tinfoil Tells, you can send an email to tinfoiltellspodcast@gmail.com. We'll get you scheduled for a future episode. My book, Shadows of Cedarville, is available now on Amazon and will soon be in other stores as well. So keep an eye out for that. If you want to help the podcast grow, just keep sharing it around. If you like an episode, share it with somebody. Social media shares, whatever you got to do, it's definitely appreciated. Helps the podcast grow. Leaving the reviews helps it. Leave a 5-star review, it'll help the podcast. Makes it a little bit more visible for people to find. We're going to go ahead now and bring on our guests for the night. So looking forward to these conversations we're about to have. Hope you guys enjoy this one. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'd like to take this time to welcome my guests tonight, Steve and Leslie. Thanks for coming out and talking with me.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Where are you guys from?
We live in Southern California in the deserts east of Los Angeles near Palm Springs. In
Nice.
the Desert Hot Springs is the town.
Nice. I've only been to California, I'll say twice, because I landed in LA and then flew from LA to somewhere else, and then I flew back to Sacramento to LA, then back. So I've never really been in California as far as walking around. I've just been at the airport.
I'm the same way with New York. I changed planes in JFK, and that's the only time I've ever set foot there.
Yeah, the first time I didn't even get out of a plane, we just sat there in the terminal until other people got off and they boarded and we left again. But then when we went to Sacramento, I had like a 3-hour overlay, so I got off the plane and had to switch planes and then go somewhere else. But
Yep.
Yeah, California is the strange place. You can go within 2 hours where we lived. You can go skiing. You can go to the beach. You can go to the desert. You can go to the woods. It's got the best and the worst of the United States.
Where are you located? In Sacramento?
no, I live in Indiana.
Oh, Indiana.
Yeah, I'm in.
That's right. The time zone. I
Yeah.
remember.
3 hours difference. I'm in one of those flyover states.
Yeah.
A lot of people say not much happens in these flyover states, but they've never actually lived here to experience some of the things that we have. So, but yeah,
I don't think I've ever been to Indiana.
Are you close to Indianapolis?
I'm about 75 miles north of Indianapolis.
Big town.
Yeah,
Capital.
that is our capital. My company's based out of Indianapolis, so I'm there every once in a while. I'm actually be there this weekend and the following weekend, and got some things going on with my family that I'm doing. So
I still work part-time, about 24 hours a week for a newspaper. I was a writer, reporter for them for a long time. And now I still do copy editing and page layout. But now it's all remote, and we're able to work from home now, and it's really awesome. I can live anywhere and still keep working.
yeah, I have the luxury of being able to work from home when I have to, but that's not all the time. A lot of the time I have to actually be where I'm supposed to be at, but there are instances where I can be from home if I need to be. So it kind of works out. But
Cool.
I know when you guys reached out to me, I think I contacted you, and I think you ended up contacting me because I saw what you guys had been experiencing or whatever. So if you'd like to dive into that, we can go ahead and get started.
It started with Stephen. He and his family are, we believe, abduction victims, maybe going back many generations. So I'll let Stephen tell you a little bit about that.
Yes. Is the volume still good? Okay. The first memory that I have myself as far as having something strange happening was when I was about 3 years old. I would have this being, at the time it was invisible, that it would wake me up in the middle of the night, maybe 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and would be jumping on my chest and my stomach. And it was kind of playful, and I didn't feel anything, malevolent about it. And, my family always talked about the family spirit guide called Old Glegley. That was kind of something that we all kind of knew about. It was supposed to be a tall black man that had a red fez and kind of helped us out when we had problems. So anyways, going forward a little bit, when I was about 9 years old, I was sleeping in a bunk bed. On top of the bunk bed, there was, at the time, it was kind of a new thing that my brother was on the bottom, who was younger than me by 6 years, and I was on the top. And I heard this rustling sound in the living room. So I got out of the bunk bed and I started walking down the hallway, and it was, dimly lit, but I remember very clearly that my heart was racing and my heart was pounding and I was scared. And the next thing I know, I wake up back in the top of my bunk bed. Time has passed. I'm not sure whether an hour or 3 hours, but I'm back in my bunk bed and I have no recollection as far as getting back into the bunk bed. Now, going forward in time a little bit, when I was 18, my father and my sister and I were all living together at the same house, so the Fallbrook house in Woodland Hills, California. And the most incredible thing that happened to me was I was sleeping on the couch on my back in the living room, and I woke up about 5:30 in the morning, and I know I was awake because I looked at my piano. I thought about, well, what kind of piano pieces I was going to play that day, and I heard the fountain in the room, and I was going to get up, but then from behind me, from the front door, about 30 feet behind me, this blue-white entity seemed to float vertically towards me, maybe 6 to 7 feet tall. It was definitely blue-white, and it stopped by my right side of my body, and as soon as it stopped by the right side of my right side of my body, it was like I was bisected. I was totally paralyzed on the right side of my body, and I could not move. And I didn't feel scared, but I was scared from the standpoint that I could not move. So this being bent down to me and said very clearly in my right ear, "Hi, Steve." And I was excited and frightened, at the same time. I thought, oh, this is the family spirit guide. So that experience lasted for X amount of seconds or X amount of minutes. I'm not even sure at this point. I'm not even sure if I even told my dad about it, but I know that it happened and the being left. Now, about 6 hours later, I decided to get some money out of my right-sided pocket about 11:30 in the morning. And as I reached into my pocket, I pulled out all these coins, and all the coins in the right side of my pocket were all magnetized. I could pick up the coins. These are all American coins, the standard quarters, nickels, pennies. I could pick them all up. I also had some nails in there because I was a cabinet maker at the time. Not important, but that's what I was doing. And I slept on my clothes, and my dad and I did not know what to make of it. But when my dad saw it and says, "This is not possible. You cannot magnetize coins." So for me, and other things have happened, throughout my life, other things that are, similar. My dad, saw a blue white entity outside of my bedroom door, and was going to get up, and the entity kind of said into his, I guess, through telepathy, said, "No, go back to sleep, Jeffrey. Everything's fine. Just relax." And he went back to sleep. My sister, my dad, and I all experienced strange things, like,
And his brother,
and my brother too.
Yeah.
My brother, who unfortunately, he experienced a missing time like myself, but he also,
he saw a gray alien in his room one time, right before he blacked out, and had a missing time episode after that. And then another time he told me he heard some scrabbling on the floor near him. He thought it was a cat, so he reached down to pet the kitty, and something grabbed his arm, like a hand grabbed his arm, and again he blacked out and had missing time episode after that. That seems to be a recurring theme in their family, is missing time after weird things.
Yeah, and my brother, unfortunately, in 2017, both Leslie and I both believe that this stuff got too much for him, and on his birthday, he took a shotgun and, well, first he killed his cats, and then he killed my mom, then he killed himself. 2017, December the 1st, and it's,
he seemed a very unstable individual through a lot of his life. We think he was adversely affected by this phenomenon, or maybe it would have just happened to him anyway. But
this guy was,
it's traumatic,
and he was a professional draftsman. He taught calculus. He's not, uneducated at all. He was quite a brilliant man, and it just, from what we can see, this, unfortunately, it was too much for him.
Yeah, that's very traumatic, especially losing your brother and your mom. I definitely.
And my dad had just died 2.5 months before that.
In fact, we think that may have been the trigger that unsettled his mind.
Yeah, they were all
the last straw.
They were all living together in a house that my dad and I had built, with our hands, because we were, my dad was both a contractor and a professional cabinet maker from England, and this was like our treasure. And my brother also helped to build it too. So these things, again, they have kind of been around in our family for at least 3 generations, to my knowledge. On the Rose side of the family from England. My parents are both from England, and I think that might have a little bit to do with it as far as the connection. In fact, the name Roe, when you look it up, means the red-haired ones, which is kind of interesting.
Then we were also both UFO sighting witnesses. Stephen saw them before I did. He's had 5 sightings in his life, and I've had 2, and he was present for both of those as well. Why don't you tell him about the early sightings?
Oh, yes. My first early sighting was when I was about 10, again, living at the Fallbrook House in Woodland Hills. I was looking out toward the east, and I saw this bright orange globe about 9-10 o'clock at night that was just floating. It wasn't blinking like an airplane. It was definitely a globe, and it was going from north to south. And I thought that was like really. I called Griffith Park about that and said, well, we don't have our telescopes aimed in that direction, so they couldn't help me there. The second one I saw with I saw in Malibu at a restaurant around about 2004 with a valet. He was getting my car for me, and we both saw this bright white light that was in the ocean, coming out of the ocean, and we both looked at each other and said, "Did you see that?" Yes, I saw that. So I had a witness there. I saw another one in Yucca Valley that was a daytime sighting that a bunch of people saw about 2005 when I was going to work, and it was actually on the radio about 8 o'clock in the morning. It was a silvery object that was just hovering there. And then the last 2, Leslie and I both saw it together, and Leslie could talk about those.
All right. It was in 2005 in January, right?
Yes.
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 And we had just come from an art club meeting at night that we met monthly. We were driving west on Highway 62 in Joshua Tree. And up ahead, we saw this bright white light in the sky, and it just seemed to be hovering there. And it didn't, at first I thought it was maybe a plane coming into Palm Springs Airport or something, but you look closer at it, there were no those extra lights on planes, the blinking reds and green lights. And there was nothing like that. It was just a single bright white light, but it started to get brighter and brighter, like it either was slowly coming towards us, and of course we were driving towards it. And then it took off over the northern horizon and was gone in less than a quarter of a second. It must have been moving at 10,000 miles an hour. And it took off immediately at full speed, no slowly accelerating to speed, just instantly, whoosh, gone over the northern horizon. And before that, I'd believed it, Stephen, when he was telling me his experiences. But when you finally see it for yourself, it just it's a whole different experience. It locks in. Yeah, it locks it in.
It definitely changes your perspective when you see it.
And then the final one we saw was, I believe, 2020
in October.
In October, we had just moved to Sky Valley, which is a part of Desert Hot Springs, and we had just gone out to our backyard about 9:30 at night. It was dark, and for me, this was the most absolute UFO that I've ever seen. It was big. It was very, very white, and it was soundless, like they are, and it was making these very, very sharp, crisp moves that were, very much weren't banking at all. Basically, sharp moves and then stop, and then another sharp move and stop. Very triangular, and then again, it shot off at one point. It shot off
again, hypersonic speed, and
speed.
Gone. Yeah,
and it was, and then two other people that we were living on the street with us also saw it too at the same time.
Yes, and then about 20 years ago, we began researching for our book, and again, after finally seeing one for myself, I became even more motivated to do the research for this book. And we started comparing UFO theory with UFO fact, what little facts we had. And we realized that it started to not match. Like UFO theory and UFO fact were not aligning. For one example is the abduction phenomenon. Everyone frequently theorizes that they're just curious about us. Aliens are just curious, and they're abducting us and taking samples out of some scientific curiosity. But the facts were not aligning with that theory. And what actually happens instead is people are taken again and again and again through their lives, and these samples taken again and again and again through their lives. And then later, their children start to be taken, and their grandchildren after them. It's definitely a family affair. And it seems like they get a sample of a DNA source that they like, and they keep coming back for that same DNA again and again. Almost like, it's a Caucasian phenomenon, mostly. About 9 out of 10 abductees are Caucasian. And so why would they be more interested in Caucasian than every other, type of human? We only represent something like 18% of the population.
Yes, about between 15 and 16% of the total Earth population is Caucasian.
And so that didn't make sense either. And that kind of thing. So it seemed to us more like it was a farmer with a cow, and he would bring the cow in, take the milk, and then put the cow back out in the field to make more milk. It's almost like they're harvesting a product off of us rather than taking just samples out of curiosity.
I've never really thought about like abductions only being for more like Caucasian people. I guess now that you mentioned it, I was sitting there thinking, I was like, I honestly haven't heard anything besides Betty and
And Barney Hill.
Barney Hill, yeah. Barney
Mhm.
was African American, but he's the only one that I could think of.
And in point of fact, we believe that Betty was the target because it came out later that Betty's sister was also an abductee victim, and so was her Betty's niece. Her sister's daughter was also being taken. So we think that maybe they were after her in particular, and why not take samples of everyone you get? Barney happened to be there. That's just a theory I have because her sister was targeted as well.
I know there are some beliefs that I don't want to screw up the term. I don't remember if it's the Pleiadians, but I think they've been also known as the Nords. I think they were the tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed race of aliens that has been talked about by many people as far as like even in the past or whatever. They believe that they were one of like the first civilizations here that helped like with humanity and everything. So
And they're supposed to be indistinguishable from humans, except that they're wearing spacesuits. And
so I don't know if that has anything to do with why they'd want to be abducting Caucasian people, just because they're similar to what the Pleiadians were. But
I believe that they're cousins to us, close cousins that separated from us, and we believe it happened 13,000 years ago. But we don't think they're visiting from distant star systems. We think they live here, reside inside the planet in underground caverns, and also in motherships in the outer space.
Yeah, the smoking gun for both of us came about when about 20 years ago we found out about the nanodiamonds and the Uccello event horizon that has been laid down in 4 different northern hemisphere continents in 10 different countries that happened almost exactly 13,000 years ago, that there was a huge burn or a huge event that happened. So
it laid down a layer of charcoal an inch thick in all these different countries. And so at one point, all these countries, their forests were on fire all at the same time, pointing to a celestial impact event. And we knew that there was a crater to be found because the nanodiamonds form in no other way. And it's the dust around a celestial object. When it comes through our atmosphere, it superheats these dust particles and it forms these little diamonds, these little tiny round diamonds. And they form in no other way. And so evidence of them in the northern hemisphere, it was proof that there was a celestial impact of some kind, but they couldn't find the crater until recently. In 2016, the crater was finally discovered, proving that a large asteroid slammed into northern Greenland 13,000 years ago. And we believe this is the source of all the 1,200 different flood myths worldwide, all pointing to a shared worldwide experience that we all had. And we think that this event caused the separation of our 2 races. And some of us went underground to survive. Some of us went into space to survive. And some of us poor schmoes ended up being left on the surface to weather the impact.
And as we were looking through different texts, of course, the Mahabharata and the Bible and some of the Eastern texts, you find one commonality that human beings did have forewarning. There was a forewarning. It may have been a year, may have been 2 years, sometimes a disembodied voice, sometimes to make an arc, sometimes to go to the highest point. But there was foreknowledge that there was going to be an impact. That is one thing that is a commonality throughout all the different ancient texts, which we also found very interesting.
Yes, and like the ancient story about Ahura Mazda and King Yima. Ahura Mazda was his god, and they were living in the area of Turkey, which has these underground cities that have been discovered. Derinkuyu, and there's another one I can't recall the name at the moment. But King Yima was told by his god, essentially, that there was going to be a winter like had never been seen before, a 150-year winter, and to dig underground cities and put a portion of the population under there to survive. And we think that in order to hollow out a city that can accommodate 20,000 people, you need at least a year, even if every human in your society is working towards that goal. But so we think they had at least a year's notice that this asteroid was coming, and that gave them time to scramble, sinking underground arcs. And the people that went in the underground arcs, they took the technology with them. That's why they're roughly about 10, 12,000 years ahead of us in technology. They're not a million years ahead of us. They're still using nuclear power. We know that because people who get too close to UFOs suffer electromagnetic radiation burns. So we know they're using the radiation, nuclear power. So we think that's who they are, is that they're essentially us, but they've been living underground for 13,000 years.
My question would be, if they have the technology to do this and they can travel through space, how come they couldn't have stopped the asteroid? Couldn't they have sent something up there to change the trajectory or just blow it up or something?
That is a very good question, and we've talked about this like from 3 different standpoints, and it's in our book as far as, because we're very much fans of Sitchin's work, and we're actually not sure whether they actually directed the asteroid towards us, whether they knew about it and they just didn't have enough technology or ability to be able to blow up the asteroid, or we don't really know for sure what the actual reasoning is.
So many of the ancient flood myths talk about God purposely destroying us. So that is one of the possibilities, that maybe this was a population curbing method to take down take us down, to take us out. Or maybe it was something they couldn't prevent. They just didn't have good enough technology to prevent it.
As an example, in the Bible, there's the Tower of Babel. That's one of the most famous stories about how human beings are becoming too noisy and we're becoming actually kind of too intelligent. And that's why the human beings were scattered to the 4 different corners of the earth. They were taught different languages. They were separated. There was something going on there we know now that the flood actually did happen, and other stories were true. Like, we now know that Troy actually existed, because that was found out, and we actually have a pretty good idea where Atlantis really probably is, according to the different stories. But,
Yeah, I put great stock in the theory that it's in the Donana bird sanctuary in Spain. They've actually done sound penetration radar stuff in the area, and they found
LiDAR
concentric rings inside this marsh that could have been in a city at one time. And what? For one thing, it's in the right place. Plato talks about it being near the Pillars of Hercules, so it's near the Rock of Gibraltar, and Dinana is just up the coast from the Rock of Gibraltar, so it's in the right place. And one thing's for sure, when that asteroid hit northern Greenland, if there was an advanced city on the coast of Spain facing out into the Atlantic, it would have been at ground zero for the 1,000-foot high tsunami that would have hit it.
This is a little ironic and interesting in general, but my last guest that I had, so it'll be the episode that airs before this one does, which won't be for a while now, but we talked about similar stuff. He wrote a book called The Hidden History of Humanity, and you can only find it on his website, which I can send you the link to where you can find his book. But
great. Yeah, love to.
He has done a lot of research. Like, the best thing that he says he does is he looks into things that is not necessarily like known, and he does a lot of research and everything. But we talked about Atlantis, we talked about the different alien races, and he has, from all of his studies or whatever, similar instances of kind of discussing like what you have. The one thing that I remember from our conversation is, and I don't remember the terms or the names of the races that he was referring to, but the timeline I think is similar to what your guys' timeline was as well. But I believe it was between the reptilians, and I don't know if it was the Pleiadians or some other offshoots of them, but, and I don't want to paraphrase because again, I don't know 100%. I didn't do the research. He spent lots of time doing it, but they had a war. So I'm wondering what you guys are saying is like the impact created from an asteroid. I wonder if it wasn't something done during this wartime, because again, it was all over the humanity, almost like in the Bible, I think too, where you said Tower of Babel. It, maybe all this goes back to that era, and maybe it was a weapon that was launched or hit or something.
Well, it does have that in the center of the crater, it has that bounce back area in the middle, which happens only in those two things, either some sort of celestial impact or a nuclear bomb. But it's, I think they showed the shocked quartz crystals that are particularly indicative of an asteroid impact.
Yes, those are definitely you can find that in the Sahara Desert, as you can find also to the melted glass. And what is that city that has the skeletons they found that still have radiation?
Mohenjo-Daro.
Mohenjo-Daro,
right? Yes, there's a city in India that they're excavating, ancient city, that looks like it's actually been impacted by nuclear weapons. The skeletons are irradiated, and the bricks are fused together at what can only be incredibly high heat. And it looks like it actually was that at one point nuclear weapons were used on this planet. Zachariah Sitchin has interesting theories on the use of nuclear power and weapons by pre-Diluvian civilizations. The way we see it is that prior to the flood, we were a pretty advanced race. We were a pyramid building, spacefaring race, but perhaps not perhaps more something like we are now, where if we spotted a big asteroid hurtling towards us right now, and we only had a year before the impact, I don't think we could successfully stop it. Not quite yet. We're working on those kinds of solutions so that we never get wiped out completely, hopefully. But those solutions are not in place at the moment. So if it were something that happened to us, say right now, what would be our solution? Well, one of the solutions that I think happened was I think they went underground. Did you ever see that movie Deep Impact by any chance?
That was the one with Elijah Wood, wasn't it?
Yes, and Morgan Freeman was the president.
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah,
that's the one. Well, I think that may be exactly what happened. Is like they saw something coming, and the only solution is to build these deep underground arcs, put your finest people, and take your technology down there with you, so that when the waters recede and you can come back up and you can start humanity again. We think that it may exactly have been what happened.
Yeah, there are papers that I read in the past that go back to the late 1960s talking about boring technology that we have, that as they drill through the earth, that literally cauterizes or basically crystallizes and basically vaporizes the rock. So those technologies, if we had developed that, it would make sense. For instance, I used to be a cave explorer. I used to do wild cave exploring where you'd like to squeeze through these little mud tunnels with just barely able to breathe. And I did a lot of that when I was younger and skinnier. And it's like, when you go into a cave, you'll see stuff that's been around there for 150, 300, 500,000 years, and it hasn't moved. It's because when you're inside the earth, that the transfer of an earthquake does not affect certain areas of the earth, especially when you're underground. So,
Right, like remember the earthquake in San Francisco during the
the
World Series game? The people who were on the BART under the bay, they didn't feel a thing. They didn't know. They came out of the BART train and what's all the commotion? What's all the all the ruckus? It was because they didn't feel it at all. So they would be the only place you'd be safe from an asteroid impact of that severity.
And another thing we found too with our research is how frequent that the Earth is hit by asteroids and meteors and disasters happen. It's a lot more frequent than you would think. And if you have the technology to be able to ride out an impact and you was coming and you didn't have to lose your civilization, your technology, and if you have the ability to be able to have a civilization, a big city, inside of a mountain or somewhere where you're more protected, why not? Why be knocked back down to the Stone Age if you had the ability?
Again,
yeah.
See, Homo sapien we know has existed for at least 120,000 years, and there's a lot of people that put it older, but we know for a fact at least 120,000 years. So supposedly we have been in the Stone Age that entire time, and we just started getting smart 13,000 years ago. To me, it seems like we're not the kind of people that would sit around picking fleas off our butts for 85,000 years. We're a pretty industrious, intelligent people. So it seems to me that what happened is we built a civilization, a pretty advanced civilization, but Hiawatha was the name of the asteroid, by the way, named for the Hiawatha Glacier in northern Greenland where it was discovered. When Hiawatha hit this, first of all, it's hard to imagine the devastation of something this powerful. When it hit, within seconds, it vaporized 1,500 gigatons of ice, which is the same amount of ice that's melted off Antarctica in the last 2 decades. And suddenly that ice is up in the air as water vapor. It would cover the top half of the Earth in clouds almost within minutes. And a sleet ring would be flying outward at hundreds of miles an hour. And when that hits the ocean, it would cause 1,000-foot-high tsunamis. And in addition to that, Charles Hapgood, the person who has the theories on the lithospheric shift, he places a lithospheric shift at some time between 18,000 and 11,000 years ago. And Hiawatha hit 13,000 years ago. So if Hiawatha, in addition to all the regular devastation it would have caused, if it also caused a lithospheric shift at the same time, that would double the size of your tsunamis. You'd have 2,000-foot tsunamis, which would just scrape civilization off the surface of the world and bring our population down to, I think it was supposed to be down to our genetic population down to about 10,000 individuals.
10,000, yes.
That the entire population of the Earth has regenerated from since.
Now, wouldn't 13,000 years ago be roughly about the time that they say the Ice Age was starting to end?
Yes. In fact, we were on our way out of the Ice Age when this happened. The Earth was slowly warming, the ice caps were receding, and we were well on our way to being almost over when Hiawatha hit. And it caused the Uccello horizon, which is that layer of charcoal we were talking about. But then there's another layer above it called the Younger Dryas boundary. And that lasted for about 1,100 years of drastic climate change. It looks like we plunged straight back into an ice age. So the impact is responsible for that. And it reversed course and plunged us right back into the ice age. And it took another 1,100 years before the climate stabilized again afterwards.
I don't know, again, I haven't done a whole lot of research, but what was the scientific reasoning as to why we were in an ice age and then we just mysteriously like came out of the ice age? Because I think, were we in the ice age for quite a long time?
I believe it's a natural evolution on our planet. It's just that we go in and out of ice ages. The ice builds up at the poles, and I think that's one of the causes of lithospheric shifts as well. Is essentially it's the Earth crust is like a skin of an orange, and on the inside is liquid. The mantle is liquid. So the theory is that these crusts can slide on the liquid and move quickly, shifting the pole to a new location. And I think just the added weight of the ice buildup at the poles can cause this shift to happen, which then moves the ice caps into a warmer region and causes them to melt.
For instance, the Hudson Bay used to be the North Pole.
The North Pole used to be the East Hudson Bay.
Yes.
18,000, between 18,000 and 11,000 years ago. And I was very fascinated by Mark Carlotto's work. He's the guy that did the imaging on the planet that shows all of the temples in the Mexico. The cardinal points align to the pole of when it was in the East Hudson Bay, indicating that these sites, maybe not the current temples that are there, but the original sites were laid down prior to 11,000 years ago.
Then you have Göbekli Tepe, which has recently been discovered within the past 20, 30 years, which has been dated back to roughly around about 12, 13,000 years ago, which is also very, very curious. And it's, there definitely was not being built by nomadic people. It was built by a civilization that had a reason and had a purpose.
I think they may be the people that built the tepes in that area of Turkey may have been the people that actually emerged from the underground cities. They're only about 300 miles away. And
from Derinkuyu.
From that underground city in Turkey, and from Derinkuyu. The tepes, the Göbekli Tepe, and then the other tepes they're discovering are only about 300 miles away from there.
I know in South America, there's also, I can't think of what it's called, but...
Pumapunku?
Yes. And haven't they determined that some of the cuts and stuff through the rocks could not have been made by normal tools from those days?
Yes. We have a whole... one or two chapters on the impossible, I call it. There's the people who built Pumapunku, to whom they're attributing it, had bronze tools, and the andesite stones at Pumapunku are they're a 7 on the Mohs scale. You could bang your bronze tool against that rock all day long, and you'll just break the tool.
Yeah, a funny little thing is that not too far from where we currently live is one of the gentlemen that is a professional lapidariist. He works with stone and rock all the time.
Oh yeah,
and
he makes beautiful sculptures.
He was interviewed by Giorgio Tsoukalos about how he would be able to make these triple layered cuts into stone. And quite frankly, if you really look at them, because I've done a lot of concrete pours in my life, a lot of cement work, and it almost looks like they were basically like they were poured. They were, if you have the ability to be able to soften stone and work with stone in the way that the ancients apparently had the ability to do.
It seemed like they're molding stone.
Looks like they're actually molds instead of being cut.
The giant H blocks.
Yeah, the giant H blocks is very, and plus the fact they're at 12,800 foot elevation, so they're way above the tree line, and it's just, I mean, when you look at it, it's like a concrete pour.
Yes, and Sacsayhuaman is not too terribly far away from there, and the andesite stones there, the largest are 200 tons. We're supposed to move these with cables made of llama skin from quarries 2 miles away, and it's madness to think that they could do it.
It makes no sense whatsoever. I was I was a cabinet maker, and I was in the military for 6 years as a CB. We did many different things as far as, doing highways and runways and doing Quonset huts and just building stuff. And I was a cabinet maker. And just when you look at things that would be done as far as like necessity and as far as what makes sense, a lot of the stuff makes no sense as far as, especially the pyramids, it's like saying they were not made the way that we were taught in school.
Well, and the big temples, the megalithic temples that we're talking about a moment ago, Sacsayhuaman and Pumapunku, there's another one nearby called Karakal. And at Karakal, when they were excavating, they found some fibrous woven material underneath the pyramids, and they were able to carbon date that, and finally discover when these pyramids were built. And much to everyone's shock, they came back as 5,000 years old, these fibers. So the Inca were, this is thousands and thousands, 2,000 years before the Inca are supposed to have been there building these temples. And there's just no way that the Inca could have done it.
Yes, the Inca are even on record saying that we didn't build this. This was here when we got here. So
they did. The early conquistadors, who is it?
Who was the conquistadors? Cortez.
When they came, they asked, they said, how did you build these? And they said, oh, no, this was here when we got here hundreds of years ago. But what this fibrous test, though, proves is that there was a pyramid building culture in Peru thousands of years before the Inca. And these are the people that were building these.
I've always thought it was strange that Egypt had pyramids. There were some in South America, and I'm pretty sure they found them elsewhere too.
They're all over, yeah.
China.
Why were pyramids being built thousands of miles apart when people couldn't communicate, but they all knew how to build them?
Well, we think that prior to the Hiawatha impact, there was a pretty advanced civilization worldwide. We believe that the pyramids are power plants, that they would move into a new area, build a pyramid so they had power, and build their society around it.
And communication.
Right. We think it's possible that these pyramids were used as, what's the thing where you shoot up to a plane to make sure, like beacons. Thank you. The word, I couldn't think of the word beacon for a moment. But they can shoot microwave beacons upward into the sky that can be seen from space. But that's one of the theories on the Christopher Dunn. He's a fascinating man. I read his book on the pyramid power plant, I think it's called.
Yes.
And it's these new theories about how in the Great Pyramid, they found residue on some of these channels that flow into the center. And if you poured those two substances together inside these sealed chambers like they had, it would cause a chemical reaction that would produce gaseous hydrogen. And once you have hydrogen in gaseous form, there's all kinds of uses you can make out of it.
It's basically hydrated zinc on one chamber, one tube mixed with muriatic acid. And when they mix together, it causes a bubbling of a chemical, and then you can light that. It's basically what you get. You get hydrogen, which is the number one element in the universe anyway. It's number one. Then helium's number two. So it's pretty basic, but they were using it, and they have the proof that they can see this in these tubes that there was hydrated zinc and there was muriatic acid. So, and they were using it for multiple purposes from what we can see.
And so very little of this civilization is still, there's very little evidence of its existence because Hiawatha was so devastating. But one thing we think is evidence of the prior civilization is some of these ancient megalithic structures that we can't even replicate today. Not without crane marks, not without, that's another question is the, have you ever heard of the trilithon stones in
That sounds familiar.
the Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek? There's these 3 stones that are put together on top of a 20-foot high platform of smaller, gigantic stones. These 3 enormous stones are make up part of the foundation of this temple, and they're enormous. They're 880 metric tons apiece, and they're cut incredibly precisely, and they're put together so tightly that you can't stick a credit card in between them. Technology that they're attributing to the Romans. And sure, the Romans did put the temple on top of that platform, but the platform, you can tell, is much older construction. It's obviously thousands of years older.
I don't understand.
Who could move that?
Yeah, I don't understand how they're claiming, even with the Great Pyramid, some of those blocks were so big, and I know they claim that they used slaves working all the time, and they used some sort of pulley roller system or something. It still doesn't really explain how they got everything built and designed.
Right. We disagree with that theory. We don't think that it was built that way. First of all, the kind of, Stephen was telling me this, they don't have hardwoods there. The only kind of log that could hold up under rolling 70-ton block would crush it, and so they would have to import hardwoods from far away.
You'd have to have ironwood, and ironwood doesn't float, so it's ridiculous.
And there's the rose quartz inside the lines the Queen's Chamber in the Great Pyramid is rose quartz. Quartz is a 6.5 to 7 on the Mohs scale. Way, way, way too hard. And they didn't even have bronze tools. They were working with copper tools.
Not even that. They have some that's 9 on the Mohs scale. That's similar to carborundum, which is one level down from diamond.
Yeah.
That is all filigree cut. So the only way we could do that today would be with either lasers or really super high pressure water jets, water cutting jets. So all this stuff, it makes no sense.
And the rose quartz was quarried down near the Aswan dam area originally. So it would have had to have been floated 600 miles up the Nile, and or I don't know, 600. Yeah, about 600 actually. About 600 miles up the Nile, and and they're cut so precisely. They're cut. One guy has actually found machine kind of marks on some of the stones that have been cut, proving that they had tools. Whoever built the pyramids, and I don't think it was the Egyptians of, that era of 2000 and 3000.
And they obviously had a sophisticated way of lighting the pyramids on the inside too. We don't see evidence of, for instance, like, using torches.
Right. They don't have soot all over the inside of these things. So how are they lighting them on the inside?
Yeah.
They're jet black on the inside.
I thought it was weird. And again, maybe I don't give enough credit to the ancient peoples, but just from a design standpoint, someone had to be very intelligent to originally design it, not to mention how long it took to build it. So obviously, if you believe the time frame, I've heard anywhere from 20 years to 200 years to
we do not.
Yeah. I don't know the time frame, but you would think if you believe what science basically has said, it's been over 200 years to build that, the original designer would have died, and they continued on. They knew how to continue to build it the same way. They've had these rooms and some intricate ways of building it. It doesn't add up, in my opinion. Like, it doesn't make any sense of we're saying these ancient people that worship the sun could build this high tech for the time, like pyramid. Yet even in today's standards, I don't even know how well architects could design it. You know what I mean?
I
With
do.
with modern technology, it would still be hard to replicate.
It would be incredibly hard. In fact, if you look at John Anthony West's work back to the 80s and the 90s, it definitively proved that the pyramids had to have been built during the time when it was there. Basically, is a fertile crest still going on. It was very green. It wasn't the desert that it is today. You can see that with the erosion patterns on the Sphinx.
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is, even if they had built it, their season in which they could build it would have been severely curtailed because of the floods, because of the rains. So they would not have had a 24/7 ability to build the pyramids in the first place.
Right. We think they're cutting blocks in an industrial way and flying them into place. That's essentially how else. That's how we would build it today. We would, lift it in with giant cranes or fly it in with.
So, in fact, I want to interject here really quickly. Have you ever heard of the Coral Castle down in southern Florida?
No.
This is very interesting. This blew my dad's in my mind back in the early 80s. We saw this documentary. This guy from Eastern Europe, about 100 pounds dripping wet, he came over to Florida in about 1910, 1920, and he was building this castle for his wife who was supposed to come over, his girlfriend, his fiance, right? And he built this thing out of coral blocks, some of them 20 tons apiece. And he only worked at night. Nobody ever saw him working. He wouldn't allow anybody to help him. He built this incredible, incredible place. And he said, when he was asked, like, well, how were you able to do this by yourself? He says, well, I know how the Egyptians built the pyramids, and I'm not going to give that information to humanity because it's too dangerous for humanity. And he built all this stuff by himself. It is, if you ever get to look at it, I tell you, just look at the Coral Castle.
It is fascinating.
It will blow your mind. Done by one person from Eastern Europe. And he had a degree in, I think, magnetics and something else. But he knew, and he had this little black box that he would use, and nobody knew what the black box was about. But this thing is something you can go see and feel and touch, and it exists. And he did it by himself.
Yes, it's a wild story. But however, he built his castle. Maybe it was the same techniques used by the ancients, but we believe that it was the pre-Diluvian people that had this technology. And we don't know a lot about them because they were scraped off the surface of the world. But one thing we do know is that they were good with stone. They were really good with megalithic constructions and stone. And that's the other thing is, like, if you don't have the technology to build in this way, why would you? Why would you? Why build a pyramid with 70-ton blocks? If you're a copper tool wielding people, you'd build it with. Why wouldn't you build it with smaller blocks? Something rational, something you can manage.
The answer is it had to be very easy for them to do.
Yeah, we're talking about high technology here, not slaves pushing blocks up ramps. Another thing, the ramp would have had to been 2 miles long, so the ramp would be actually more material than the pyramid itself.
And where are the tailing piles?
Yeah. And also, one of the interesting things is the quarries for most of those blocks are on the opposite side of the Nile.
They had to been floated across the Nile River just to get to where they needed to go.
And, the reality of a 70-ton block, this thing is bigger than our house.
Yes.
No one ever
small
really,
house, but
no one ever really considers the impossibility of it being done until they're like, I haven't been there, but I could just imagine the size of these blocks. I work in construction, so I understand how things are built, and we do road construction, highway construction, bridges, stuff like that. And I see these big off-road dump trucks, and they haul like 20 tons up to 30 tons of dirt. Well, you put that into like a block, that is a massive block. And I don't see how people could pick that up, move it, even if they're rolling it, and still manage to get it up in the air on top of another big block. You know what I mean? It doesn't ever add up.
Like the trilithon stones. Not only are they 880 metric tons apiece, they're perched up high on a hill, and the quarry is way down the hill at the bottom of the hill. So they would have had to drag it up this hill and put it then on top of a platform 20 feet high. And how do you get them to where they're, even if you have some sort of a cantilever system of somehow moving them, how do you get them so close to one another that you can't put anything between them? It's mad.
Yeah,
and there's no crane marks on them.
Yes, no crane mark. Even
Even if we could, and I am told by people that it can't be, we can't move them today. We don't have a crane that can lift up an 880 metric ton block uphill and put it on top of a 20-foot platform. And even if we could do it, we couldn't do it without crane marks gouging the sides of the block. And on these stones, there are none.
Yeah, it's hard to fathom the way things were done and the way it's being explained to everyone without, I don't think they expect people to have somewhat common sense, and the ones who think about it, like you guys or me or anyone else that's has enough gumption to question the logic in things, it seems like we're the ones that are ridiculed for not agreeing with the science that's been presented that doesn't really add up.
Yeah, to question is the answer, as they say.
And I've always found it strange that people can look at, drawings of, mostly we have drawings of the gray aliens from the abduction victims, and they essentially look like human children. They're slight of build, their heads are a little too large, and their eyes are bigger than ours, and they're blacker. But essentially, they're built like humans. They look like humans. In fact, to me, they look like people who maybe have been underground for 10,000 years. We would maybe lose some stature, where we might become a lot more pale. Our eyes would get maybe larger. So when I see a gray alien, a picture of a gray alien, I don't see an alien. I see a close relative. I mean, think about our closest relative here on the planet. It's that chimp that's been discovered in West Africa, the bonobos, I believe they're
the
called.
bonobos.
That's supposed to be the closest relative that we have here on the planet to us, but it's nothing like us. The pelvis is tilted. It's still a four-legged animal when it's running away. It's barely able to walk on two legs at all. It's still arboreal. It still flees into the trees when it's frightened. We have a lot more in common physically with the gray aliens than we do with our most close relative on this planet. And somehow this creature is supposed to have evolved on a different star system, on a different planet, and is coming here through wormholes or something. And then the Nordics, they are indistinguishable from human beings. I don't see aliens when I see these creatures. I see in my imagination, I see close relatives.
And for instance, to the chimpanzees that Leslie was just talking about, they don't have a neocortex like we Homo sapiens have. That's something that is really kind of developed in the human, the Homo sapiens in the past 300 or so thousand years. Which is also interesting. You listen to Jason Martell's work, because he kind of believes a little bit like we do too about the Anunnaki. When you look as far as when the speech centers in Homo sapiens sapiens were developed, there's like 2 parts on the DNA that look like, according to dissection studies, that looks like it was a cut and paste, or like we're doing with CRISPR currently in the past 10 years, that it looks like that the speech center, like about 300,000 years ago, was all of a sudden, boom, now we have the ability to speak. And it looks like that with the neocortex, it was actually a physical manipulation. So that's
of the human genome.
Of the human genome.
Yes. We do subscribe to the uplift theory that at one point in our history, we were uplifted.
I would actually agree with that one too, because when it comes to evolution, I don't believe that we've evolved just from normal evolution. I think we were tinkered with, if that makes sense.
It absolutely makes sense. Yes.
I want to.
There's a few missing links where we just make enormous jumps.
Yeah.
I think it's due to uplifting.
I want to make a point to the audience out there. When we talked about these megalithic blocks, you said the one was 880 metric tons.
Yes.
For anyone that is from America, and we go on the pound system here, that is roughly 1.94 million pounds.
Yes.
And that is one.
It's 800 regular tons, I believe.
Yeah. It ends up being, I just did the math. If I did the math correctly, it ended up being like 1,940 or 4,000 some odd tons. So it ends up being like 1.94 tons or million tons.
What I found very interesting too, that if you look at the stuff even going back to Easter Island and Stonehenge and also to Egypt, you find a lot of commonality where the sound of a horn or the sound of some type of music or some type of vibration would be part of the thing about making these stones either walk into place or to be levitated. So we're working with harmonic sound vibration to be able to change the density of minerals and different substances. And it's something that to me, it's like a lost technology. We have the technology to be able to work with stone, to be able to work with vibrational, different types of systems. And we were able to manipulate things much more simply than we can today. Now we have satellites in space. We have a different type of technology that perhaps they didn't have, but they certainly have the technology of being able to work with stone. That is pretty much, you can kind of see.
Yes, they were brilliant with the stoneworkers for sure.
How do they?
I'm sorry.
I'm going to ask, what does the scientist claim that they used to shape these stones? What was their old explanation for that?
Yeah. Supposedly that they're shaping these they're shaping these stones by hand. That it's possible, even with bronze tools, you can do a certain amount of chipping and sanding and grinding with sand, which is, it's mental that anybody would do this at this scale. And then they were supposed to be dragging these 200-ton stones up with llama skin cables and thousands of slaves. But it's just mad. It's
not what happened. They had some way of somehow manipulating the molecules or the density of whatever may be granite, and being able to, like, even they call, like, the, what was it? It wasn't the giants. It was the titans, right? Or what? It was the Nephilim.
The Nephilim.
The ones that basically had made, like, the stuff in Malta. They literally were able to carry this stuff, and
the Cyclops.
The Cyclops. Literally, almost like used their hands and basically to almost melt them. You can see how it's done without any mortar at all. These things are put together just like they literally are almost fused together.
And since we know we have the 5,000-year-old carbon dating of the netting material, So now we know for a fact that there was a 5,000-year-old pyramid building culture in that area that we know nothing about. That it just isn't the Inca. It's these other people that are long gone, but were definitely there 5,000 years ago, building megalithic construction. I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Steve. What were you going to say?
That's okay.
Sorry.
I was going to ask, I always kind of wondered this myself, and I know a lot of people try to debunk this, but have you heard anything about there being a possible pyramid in Antarctica?
Oh, yeah, we've heard that. We've also heard about the Black Pyramid in Alaska.
Yeah.
You know, the one that's supposedly that was discovered due to an H bomb that went off or something.
It was a test, nuclear test, underground nuclear test done in China. And the reverberations through the Earth's crust were actually able to be measured. And the U.S. was looking at the data and discovered a pyramidal shape underground in Alaska. And Linda Moulton Howe has done some fascinating work on this. It seems that there are rumors from people that there's an underground human alien base in Alaska at Mount Hayes, and then also at this other location on this underground pyramid.
I know Alaska has a lot of strange activity for sure.
Yes, MUFON is very active up there, and they say that the base at Mount Hayes is a joint U.S. military and alien base.
Yet to be confirmed.
Yes.
But as far as the pyramid in Alaska, that's also something that we've heard about, and we've done some research into it. Where it kind of makes sense in a way. You know, we've heard from different pilots that have flown over that have seen things they weren't supposed to see, and we do know that from the core sample drilling that Antarctica at a certain point was definitely very, very verdant and had all the trees. It was basically tropical at a certain point. We just don't know at what point that, due to pole shifting.
Those darn lithospheric shifts.
Yeah.
Put it square in the bottom of the planet. But
I've always found it strange that they don't allow anyone to go there.
Yes.
Permission from
there's enormous no-fly zones mapped out as well, where you're not allowed to fly over.
And then if you put any type of credibility into the diary of Admiral Byrd about seeing a mammoth and seeing green fields and things such as that, and him being debriefed as soon as he got back in Washington, if you put any credence into that being, what would be his motivation to write something that was like so,
sounded mad.
Sound mad, right? So anyway.
And there was also the incident where the project Operation High Jump, Admiral Byrd was supposed to be down at the South Pole heading the Operation High Jump that was attacked by flying saucers that came out of the ocean and attacked his carrier group. Yeah. And then this diary claims that he was at the North Pole at the exact same time he was supposed to be at the South Pole. So the diary where he talks about going flying his plane underground and meeting with this man who looks human and has a slightly Germanic accent. He said Nordic accent, yes. We believe that it happened at the South Pole, and for whatever reason, he decided to say the North Pole in his diary. But we know for a fact he was physically at the South Pole when this flyover was supposed to have happened.
With him
being was supposed to have happened.
A decorated military man and everything, I don't understand the diary portions of it. Although people have claimed these diaries were just fabricated by someone else, they weren't really his diaries. And I don't know if that's true or not. So I don't think anyone could really know that at this point. It was
found by his son amongst his effects, and published posthumously, obviously. So that lends some credence to it for me. Also, it happens to coincide with our theories about underground civilizations.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of Antarctica, under the ice.
One thing that we do know that in 1947, Operation High Jump did occur, and there was a huge battalion, a huge flotilla that was sent down to Antarctica. It was supposed to be there for, I think, about 6 months. They turned tail after about 3 months. It happened, of course, right after, 2 years after the end of World War II, and there had to be a reason for sending so many ships down there, because there have been rumors during World War II about the Germans being very interested in Antarctica, and they had a lot of stuff going off of.
There was no rumor he was sending enormous amounts of resources down there.
Yeah, in fact, that reminds me too. I remember that he did an interview, wasn't it in? Was it Tierra del Fuego or was it Argentina?
Yes, Admiral Byrd, apparently after they turned tail and ran, which was a good idea since they were getting the tar beat out of them, they went to South America, and Admiral Byrd did an interview in which he was forthcoming about what happened. And to a certain extent, anyway, he said that, we are now faced with an enemy that can travel from pole to pole in 20 minutes. And in this interview, it was published in the local paper at the time. But then he went back to Washington and was debriefed, and of course was completely silent about anything after that, about the incident afterwards.
I know.
So they muzzled him, in other words.
Yeah. I know after World War II, or maybe it's during World War II, I think the Nazis were supposedly had a base down there as well. And
yes.
I've had interviews with people that have told me that the Nazis were working with aliens, which I know there was a German lady, I think it maybe had been a German lady that was communicating with the 1920s. I can't think of what her name is off the top of my head.
Madame Blavatsky?
Yeah, that might have been it. But
I know it couldn't sound crazier if we were making it up, but in point of fact, Hitler, a submarine captain said he'd found some paradise under the ice for his Führer, and the next thing we know, they were sending mass amounts of resources down there, especially building stuff, engineers and the trappings for making a base basically there. And supposedly that was what the objective of Operation High Jump was to go down there and destroy this base. They were met with flying saucer resistance, flying up out of the ocean.
I've heard stories about the reptilians actually being down there, because I don't think a lot of people know, but Antarctica has a lot of volcanoes under the ice. I think there is 130 something volcanoes that actually there. And if this species actually exists and is a reptile-based species, you think they would want heat. So it makes sense if they're underground with all these volcanic chambers and everything else, this would be a perfect paradise for them. So yes. I've always wondered if they know this exists. Maybe the Nazis discovered this and the Americans were looking into it, and then they all figured out what's going on. So it's like, oh, no one could go to Antarctica.
It was really fascinating. Do you ever see the debriefing of the Apollo 11 astronauts after they were, they come back, their first people to set foot on the moon, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, and they're being debriefed there, by the news organizations, and they look absolutely just depressed. They're absolutely depressed. These guys had just gotten back from the moon, and they were like heroes, but they were being asked questions, and they just were.
They looked nervous.
They looked nervous and just basically cowed. And if you listen to any of the stuff that people have said, that one of the things that they were actually greeted when they landed on the moon, they were actually greeted by reptilians, which is, whether that happened or not, I don't know. But I just know from that debriefing that these guys, they looked really just like miserable.
And Buzz Aldrin has said that they were tailed all the way to the moon by a light, essentially, that tracked them it followed them all the way to the moon. And he was willing to say that out loud in the press.
I've kind of wondered why they stopped going to the moon in general. None of that ever made sense, because after, I think, 1972 or 73, we stopped doing the Apollo missions, and we've never been back to the moon since, to the best of my knowledge.
Yeah, but they've discovered water there now, and so water can be used as, I guess, a fuel. So now it could be a launching station now.
And hydrogen-3, which is a tremendous fuel source too, which apparently it's replete with H3 on the moon, so there's that motivation too.
Yeah, and we as a species are still going back, just not we as Americans so far.
Yeah. Again, I've always just kind of wondered, like, did we actually make it there, or was it kind of all just we had to beat the Russians, so they made it seem like we actually went there? I've never really. I've questioned the whole moon landing.
We believe we went.
Yeah. I've questioned the moon landing for a long time. Like, I don't know if we did, if we didn't. At the end of the day, it doesn't affect me in any sort of way, so I don't really worry about it. But when it comes to why we stopped going, if we really went there, I've always been wondering, like, what did they see on the moon that made them not want to go back? Because I've heard stories about NASA destroyed all the information they had of how to build the equipment just to get to the moon, which didn't make any sense why they would destroy that. They claim it was because they didn't want that information getting out to, like, the Soviets or anything like this. So all their documentation for how they built their shuttles and their rockets and everything, they destroyed it all.
Are you kidding? Wow, I hadn't heard that one. You know, the weirdest one is the one where they crashed the moon lander, from Apollo 12 into the moon to get some seismic readings, and it rang like a bell for 2 hours. So the moon is hollow and made out of metal. You know what?
If you read Jim Marr's book Alien Agenda, he used to work for NASA or something, whatever, and he talked a lot about that in the first couple chapters about how it appears that the moon appears to be hollow. It rings like a bell, and so that's also another interesting little piece there.
I'm willing to believe a lot of unusual things, right? We're pretty open-minded that way, but the idea that the moon could be a giant space station made out of metal and is just coated in dust from, the millions of years it's sat there. It's a little more than I can handle. My mind kind of goes snap when I think of that one.
I've had some interviews with people, one in particular, that they don't even believe the moon exists. They think the stars and the moon and everything are all just lights, and the sun, they're all here. It's a flat Earth theory. But there are definitely some people out there that believe a lot of different things.
And, it's America. Go ahead.
I will say this, and in an all serious manner, when it comes to flat Earth, don't ever watch videos about flat Earth, because then you start to question some of the things that they do bring up. You're like, wait a minute. Because I used to laugh and joke and think they were crazy, but then I've watched some certain things like, well, this doesn't make sense. Why is this? So I was like, all right, I got to quit looking into it.
Like a glitch in the matrix kind of thing.
Some of the things that they do talk about, it does seem to be, makes more sense than what most people would say for science, but at the same time, I don't necessarily believe we're on a flat Earth either. So
I prefer swallowing the red pill than the blue pill.
Yeah. You can put us in the category with the science people more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, guys, is there anything else you'd like to discuss? Because we're getting about that time where I'm trying to wrap things up.
I realized we hadn't mentioned the name of the book. Can we do that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Our book is called Who They Are and What They're Up To, and it's available on Amazon. The first chapter starts with a lot of UFO history in the U.S., kind of a crash course, because we had to bring the layman reader up to the level of a beginning ufologist to at least discuss our theories, and then from chapter 2 on, we begin discussing our theories.
And the preface begins with our experiences, especially mine and my family, and like I say, the incident with the magnetized coins. So it's good to read. If everybody's gonna read the book, definitely start with a preface and go from chapter to chapter. That's the way it makes sense that way. Just don't skip ahead.
And you said that it is available on Amazon.
Yes, available on Amazon and Ingram as well.
If you would like to send me the link, which you may already have, but if you want to send me the link, I will put all those in the show notes for it. They can go right to your book.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. I like to go off into the topics of science and other things too. So that's what I mean by that. So
I was an acupuncturist for 20 years. I'm kind of like the advanced electrician of the human body, the way I kind of see it.
Yeah.
And he was so helpful with, I did most of the writing, but I couldn't have written it without him, because there was all this analyzing of the brain and how the brain developed and the genetic genome of the human body. And I was lost. I had to have his science and medical background too.
How long did it take
We're
to
definitely a
write?
team. Mm-hmm.
How long did it take you to write the book?
1 year.
And
Exact.
how many, for anyone listening, how many pages is it? Because some people like reading big in-depth books.
280.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's 60,000 words.
Nice.
It's easy to read. We don't talk about people's heads, but we also like to put in the accurate data. We're definitely not rabbit hole people. We've tried over, with our research over 20 years to be able to mold it into something that makes sense.
And like I said, at first our theories weren't lining up with facts. So whenever you find yourself in that situation, you have to throw out those theories and start making new ones,
Mm-hmm.
presumably based on the facts.
Yeah.
Based on reality.
I agree. There's a lot of things that happen too that just from experience and from what others have experienced. I don't know if all the facts are out there for us at this time, because I think there's a lot of things we still need to discover.
For me, as I said at the very beginning, the coins being magnetized, I still have not been able to find, with all my research so far, is how to magnetize U.S. coins. And for that happening, I don't know whether it was plasma energy, whatever it was, whatever the being did to me, I know that it happened because it happened to me. So that's something that is like, people could say they've seen UFOs, but I've actually had contact with some variation on the theme of the aliens, and I know they're real.
I'll send you some little pictures too, and some promotional stuff.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine. Well, again, I appreciate you guys coming on here tonight. So thank you.
you so much.
Yep. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Remember, the truth lies in the stories we share, the connections we make. Stay curious, stay open-minded. Thank you all for joining us on this journey, and until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep exploring the unknown. Good night, everyone.